How is everybody doing? And welcome back for another Strength Chat episode. I last spoke to this guest back in episode 196, a really, really popular episode to you all. So it is an absolute pleasure to welcome back the one and only Andrew Coates. How are you doing?
Thank you, Stephen. It's refreshing to do these with people who don't have the, Canadian North American accent. So it's a bit of novelty for me because this is my second of three today, and I believe all three of you guys are from across the pond, which is actually kind of cool. So, and I know you guys are recording probably pretty late in your day. It's my afternoon.
Yeah, so it's about 8 o'clock now. So actually, I ended up finishing a little bit earlier in the gym, which is pretty good. I've already had my tea, so I'm fueled up, ready to go. But yeah, been a while since we last spoke. Really appreciate you taking the time to jump on again. Like I say, the previous episode that we had, for anyone listening that hasn't listened to it, really popular, well received episode. What's been happening in your world? What's been happening since we last spoke?
Oh God, time blurs together. So I've had a lot of invitations for public speaking. I did 8 events last year. 6 were in person, 2 virtual. This year, I think there's probably 5 or 6 so far confirmed, and that's just like early January, so more will pop up. I started writing for Muscle and Fitness magazine and Men's Health magazine, the website, since we talked, and things otherwise are just steaming full speed ahead. Social media has even more exploded since I've talked to you, which is kind of wild. And but at the same time, at the heart of it all, it's really the same old, same old. I'm fulfilled by working with the clients I get to work with. Everything else is cool. The invitations that come on to podcasts like this are always very kind. So I always try to make sure I can make the time for them. I think it's awesome. So I'm ready to answer questions. What do you
Lovely.
got?
Yeah, definitely. And well, I it was just touching on the presentations. I managed to be able to tune in to the Kabuki Strength Week that you were on last year as well. Are we revisiting that this year as well? Because I've got my ticket.
Absolutely. So yes, and I'm gonna pump this. So if anybody's interested in that, I have links and it'll save you $30 US for it. And I actually get a commission for it, which is super cool to get paid to do this sort of stuff. So shoot me a message afterwards and I'll literally send you my links and the code. But yeah, so I'm doing another one for Kabuki Education Week. And this one is going to be a lot of coaches are interested in growing their career, their brand. And I like to point out that most of the prominent legacy educators, more well-known figures in the industry, largely got their starts because they wrote. So they wrote for things like T Nation, or Lane Norton got to start writing for bodybuilding.com and in various other publications, writing for themselves. And it's really the thing that jumped me off in a fairly big way. Yeah, sure, social media grew, but it really was buffered by the fact that I've been writing for T Nation for 4 years. I've been writing for Muscle Fitness for a year. I've written for stuff like Generation Iron and Barbend and the Personal Trainer Development Center. And again, Men's Health is the biggest of the bigs, right? And that lends a lot of credibility and authority to someone. So if you want to build a credibility and authority, then I do encourage coaches to start writing for their own websites, which can also be a really great asset to serve the person in front of you. Maybe the goal isn't to grow a big following and kind of that big educator facing career. Maybe it's just to attract more clients and really serve the people you're serving well. You get all kinds of questions from people that you end up answering over and over and over. You demonstrate the same stuff. There's a lot of power in building a library of free resources, whether it's an article on the various different Q&A type things that people will ask you over your career. Maybe you film a whole bunch of demo videos and you can embed them within the article that explains it. It's all on your website. And when someone asks you that, you instead of going, it's not about going, I've already answered that a million times here, just go read this article. It's, hey, you know what? This is a really common question. Here, I'm going to answer it with respect to your individual situation, but I'm also going to send you this article and it's got a video on this, and this should also help. And so all of a sudden that person goes, wow, like this is more than just your average trainer's resources. This is pretty professional stuff. So I think it can enhance the experience for the client in front of you, the potential client, all while opening doors to maybe bigger facing things. Because if I hadn't started writing for my own website, and if I didn't have my podcast, when we had my T Nation editor on as a guest before I wrote for them, she saw all these resources that I had built, and she turned around and asked if I would come write for T Nation. I've been reading T Nation my entire career, so that was a big honor for me. And that's the first step that really mushroomed up into something much, much bigger. So if anybody is interested in like learning more about how to get started with writing, resources, a foothold in it, some stuff about getting published, that's what my talk is about for Kabuki. But I hope all that stuff makes a lot of sense anyway. What's fair? Is your audience more coaches or is it more enthusiasts anyway?
It's a little bit of a mixture as it's grown, especially for the questions that I've had for this podcast. Is probably going to be more coaches,
Cool.
just because from the talks that you've done, and I think I can't remember whether you put a post out about it or you may have recommended the last time we spoke sort of books on improving your writing skills, which I think is really useful. And I actually listened to it a couple of weeks ago. You did I know it was last year when you did the podcast, but you had a podcast with Cody McBroom about
yes
about long form content, and that and I suppose this is diving into like the main topics of the conversation. There's usually tangents in there, but having sort of that like what you mentioned, that air of authority behind that. And do you think that when probably for more coaches, putting social media out there and wanting to develop a social media following rather than putting actual useful content out there that's going to be there, people can always refer back to it, always go back to it, rather than thinking more followers is going to give more authority within the fitness industry? Does that make sense what I said?
It makes sense. And there's a whole bunch of stuff here. So let's actually dive in. I love this. Let's talk about this recently. I think humans are wired to think in terms of status. They seek status. 100% humans do that. But what I try to caution coaches on is not to try to approach this as I want to gain status. I want to gain importance. I want to gain, be, kind of this A-lister personality within the industry. And I think people crave that. And that's the wrong lens to look at it through. I think if you build the resources and you tirelessly just share great information with people and you become more of an educational figure within the industry and you build relationships in the industry and you get the support of other people because you've done good things that they want to support, not because you're asking for it, then the status becomes a byproduct. I mean, I don't like thinking in terms of the lens of status, but let's be honest. Your Dr. John Berardi's, your Jonathan Goodman's, your Luca Hosevars, your Sohilis, your Molly Galbraiths, they have a lot of status within the industry because of a legacy of what they've done. We have a more modern shortcut, which can be, going viral on social media, getting a lot of followers fairly quickly, which is rare, but it can happen. Some people buy their followers and they fake the large number of following. And those people are definitely status seekers. They think in terms of status, but it's easy enough to see. So understanding that, you still have to have a long game attitude. You have to show up consistently without the expectation of a specific result every time you share a podcast episode or write an article or share a social media post. Not get discouraged when, maybe not a lot of people respond to it. That's kind of like what we teach our clients when it comes to showing up every day, consistently making the meals good, continue to show up at the gym and not get discouraged when the scale hasn't moved for a period of time. It's about the long game behaviors, not big leaps forward. And I still believe that the foundation for every successful educator, influential figure in our fitness industry that we, the established people tend to respect, has built a foundation of free educational long content resources and built successful businesses. And usually a combination of both. If you look at someone who talks about it a lot is Jordan Syatt. So Jordan's a good example. Jordan has written a ton of articles over the years that still get a lot of search on Google. So it drives a lot of people to his website, his business, his inner circle. Jordan has 2 podcasts. One serves his personal training mentorship with Mike Vacanti, which is very good. And the other one is the mini podcast, which is one of the most popular podcasts in fitness in the world. It does really well, super popular. Jordan also is very social media savvy. So he's built social media by very smart social media, really got big on infographics in 2017, but it was backed up by having all these other things. He's also been very active with YouTube. Along the way, because of relationships, he ended up coaching Gary Vaynerchuk. It's a unique little thing, but if you end up being the coach of someone who's kind of famous, it could add a little bit more of an air of credibility. Jordan and Mike have more recently written a book called Eat It, which is born from the fact that they've done a lot of fitness writing over the years. And Jordan ends up, because of all these other things, getting a lot of invitations to speak at events. We both spoke at one together in Scottsdale, Arizona in early December of last year, along with Lane Norton was one of the people in that event, and so was Bedros Keuilian. Alex and Leila Hormozi were supposed to be speakers, but they had to bow out, so they brought in Bedros and a couple other people. So, but all of the things that keep happening are a product of the fact that Jordan is just relentlessly put together a lot of good, free, long-form content. And he's been featured in various other publications. And there are countless other examples of people in the industry like that. And again, people like to see, oh, you know, his social media blew up. Sure. And he's mentored other people who've done well on social media. My pal, Eric Roberts. Okay. Eric does social media as well as anybody, TikTok and Instagram. But Eric's also got a podcast. He's got YouTube, and he has written a lot of articles on specific things that serve his audience. So he's built the long form stuff. So there's a common thread with virtually anybody that's out there has built these long form content resources because A, they serve the people you're trying to help anyway, and it will bring more people to your door. It sets you apart. If people find you on social media, let's say you get really good at writing thoughts and captions on social media. I know people give me credit for that. But if they find your social media and then they're kind of like, all right, what else is there? And then all you have is social media, it's kind of a letdown. And you miss the opportunity to create a deeper relationship with those people, and they spend more time on your work. They can get into, I have 2 podcasts. They can get into the fact that I've got a lot of written resources, and I've written for a lot of publications. Or I don't do much with YouTube, unfortunately, but it's just there's demands on our time. Or they can end up, checking out something like one of my talks on something like Kabuki Education Week, or, especially for coaches in the industry who want to grow. I think one of the smartest things you can do is when educational conferences start coming up and you've got, well-respected speakers, go there and meet the people who are doing the talks, but meet the people who made the effort to travel there, because those are hardworking, ambitious, driven people who are probably doing some really cool stuff. And I've drawn a lot of inspiration, and I've gotten a ton of support from the people who were sitting next to me in the events when I first started traveling to them and attending them. Quick story. The first event that I traveled to was in 2017. It's an event called the Fitness Summit in Kansas City. Really amazing event. And I met a lot of who's who of the industry at that event. A lot of big names. But I also met a ton of other people who were just attendees like me. And I scooped them all up on Facebook. This is before I was even into Instagram. And deepened a lot of relationships. One of them is my friend Tim Arndt. Tim, cool guy. And I discovered that he hosts an event in Spokane, Washington, which is not super far from me in Edmonton, Canada. And he had a pretty good lineup for his event in 2018. It's a smaller event. So I said, sure, I'm going to come down. I loved it. I met a lot of really great people, including a friend who was one of my first points of contact to give my writing a bit more of attention. I didn't even know that he had the connection he did. Cool. And I wasn't seeking this. I just went to hang out and learn. And then I went again in 2019. I had a great time. Pandemic screwed everything up for a while, but he rebooted in 2021, and travel was hard back then. There was a lot of hoops to jump through, but I went because Tim actually asked me to come speak, because all my other media had grown to the point where he wanted me to speak. It was my first invitation to speak at anything. Great chance, because it was a smaller audience, good chance to get the experience. Went really well. One of the other attendees has his own event. He invited me to speak at it the next year, named Luke Carlson, great guy. And then, of course, people started seeing this whole thing, and all of a sudden, invitation that turned into 8 events last year. At that first event in Kansas City in 2017, I also met my friend Jeff Aker. Jeff, turns out, is from a nearby city called Calgary, and he's the provincial director of the NSCA, the National Strength and Conditioning Association. And a lot of people have heard of the NSCA. Yeah. And so they have provincial clinics and regional and national and all this sort of stuff. And so it turns out Jeff has his provincial clinic. So I go and I attend it in Calgary in 2018, and he does it in Edmonton in 2019. I attend it and I support it. And then come 2022, he's doing it back in person again, and we get to talking. I've already been doing more talks. So we agree that I'll come and do a presentation at this event. It goes really well. One of my followers happens to be part of the regional board for the NSCA in the Rocky Mountain region in the US. And so he wants me to come down. They're going to pay me to come down to give a talk in Tempe, Arizona, and put me up at a hotel. And that went super well. That was really cool because he wanted me to come down and do the same talk that he knew about. And it went great. And I met a lot of really cool people. And I know there's like a couple of rambling stories in there, but the point of the matter is if you show up just to put yourself in these great environments along with these other people without an expectation of what you're going to get out of it. I did plan on 4 or 5 years now, these people are going to be hosting conferences and maybe I'll get to speak at them. I don't think like that. I just wanted to go and meet people and learn and just travel a bit. And honestly, now it's turned into something where I can't even believe the opportunities that are coming up this year, all because I just committed to going and showing up at these things then. And pretty soon I'm going to have to start turning a lot of stuff down, which is a nice problem. You eventually get to that point where you have to learn to say no to shit.
Yeah.
I hope the underlying message comes through in that it's do the work, show up, support other people. Don't think in terms of what you can get out of it. Think in terms of how you can serve and help and support other people, because we're all fulfilled by helping people with our careers. I mean, that's what they all say, right? You're like, oh, it's not about the money. Well, guess what? If you make a nice livelihood, it helps you stay in the business that helps people and you love, which is also why I'm passionate about giving coaches resources to build their careers, because if it keeps them in the game, you get to keep doing the thing you love versus go do something else that you feel like some more secure paycheck, which it's not. That's a lie. I hope there's a bit of useful stuff there.
Absolutely, I thought that was really good, and I was actually having a conversation a week or so ago about the average lifespan of somebody who starts off as a personal trainer, and the turnover is huge. I think it's something like the last stat was like 4 years or something like that. And one thing that you said there, obviously, speaking to people, going to these events. We also mentioned Jordan Syatt there, all these maybe trends that he did in terms of like YouTube, in terms of podcasts and other things. And do you think, much like clients can sometimes jump onto fads in terms of, oh, there's this new exercise program, I need to do that. Do you think coaches sometimes have a tendency to do that and sometimes lose sight of, I don't know what the best way, maybe their values and philosophies in terms of, we're here to help people, not just to try and put all of our endeavors into the latest fad that's going to get us more followings?
There's a lot of stuff there. One is ego, and there is again, it comes back to this desire for status. So occasionally I'll see coaches, they'll try to brand into unclaimed real estate as a metaphor. And oftentimes the real estate's unclaimed because it's not very attractive. The more famous example of, and most of the good, it's like, living in any sort of city, most of the good central real estate's already taken and very expensive and sought after. So if you want to differentiate yourself, you tend to have to go on the fringes a bit more. The Liver King is the perfect metaphor for grabbing onto fringe extremist real estate. But at least in nutrition, it's common to see people drawn to the extremes. The carnivore diet is more extreme. I mean, I don't want to offend any vegans, but there is an extreme nature to veganism as well. At least some people take it. I think there's evidence-based veganism, and then I think there's ideological veganism, and there's sort of a middle ground. If people want evidence-based resources on being a vegetarian vegan, go follow my friend Melody Schoenfeld. She's got a great book on this. An unbelievable human being, right? Yeah. But coaches sometimes try to brand themselves into these extreme places, whether it's very performative training methodologies on social media. And there are people who manage to do it quite well. And then there are people who turn it into a complete circus performance, which I don't think is necessarily helping people. So again, I think it's still status seeking. I mean, it's an attempt to differentiate, and I understand it. But I think there's something really, really solid about doing the fundamentals as well, if not better than anybody else, which is kind of my approach to things. And it resonates with a pretty broad array of people because I don't look for the fringes and the extremes. So I think that's kind of what happens. And bring me back to the original question again, because I think there was something else I wanted to say, but I want you to bring me back to it again.
Yeah, so when we touched on it, that people will jump on the fads, and people are like, oh, so Jordan Syatt's doing this, Andrew Coates is doing this, and then swap and change from different things. Whereas, before Instagram, Instagram seems to be the all-seeing eye of everything at the minute. A lot of people, coaches that were around before social media all of a sudden get social media and they get a following because of the work they've done previously, not because all of a sudden they've jumped on there. So, newer coaches coming into the industry forgetting, what their actual mission objective is as a coach, if that makes sense.
Totally does. So I'm very grateful to look back and think, all right, I've always been kind of rooted in just the basics of kind of bodybuilding and strength training. I never got caught on with, fads. I never became the kettlebell trainer. I never became the TRX trainer. I would use those tools as a piece of the puzzle, the fundamentally good stuff, not the circus stuff. I think a lot of people are still searching for an identity, and it's the shiny object syndrome that occurs to the clients who are trying to program hop to find the next best thing. But we as trainers, we can also be vulnerable to that too. And we get shown some shiny new object that promises more than it delivers. And I think a lot of coaches can go through a phase where they're seeking an identity. And that's adjacent to what I said about, trying to grab onto real estate to differentiate themselves. But sometimes it's, hey, I'm really drawn to this. Coaches also have the things that they enjoy, and therefore we tend to specialize in or be stronger in our areas of interest and expertise. But we get into trouble when we then turn around and think that is the only way or the best way, if we're not necessarily, really evidence-based about it. I'm trying to think of a good example of this, but anybody who's really branded around calisthenics is classic, body weight stuff. It's great. But when it gets into this really circus performative stuff, as if to say everybody, has to do this is the best way to build muscle. Well, no, it's not, because while, things like chin-ups can be a phenomenal way to take you to failure to create the stimulus to grow muscle and strength, there's a lot of very basic body weight stuff, especially in the yoga realm, that isn't going to create the kind of training stimulus to be able to optimally build muscle. And that's not to bag on yoga. I think yoga is actually a wonderful modality if you're using it for what it should be used for. But a lot of calisthenic stuff, there's limits to just how much body weight lunges or, stuff you can do on a TRX that will ultimately, or hanging from a bar, is going to help you optimally build muscle. And quite frankly, if your goal is to have the biggest legs possible, it's not going to work very well. Or if you start thinking that plyometrics is the only path to building muscle, great if done right for explosiveness, good for power. But we're also going to have limitations. So I think we have to have a broader array of skills and not get really entrenched into this one discipline. I think if you really love something, and if you want to self-select the right audience and clientele who are drawn to how you do it, and it's something that's still pretty solid, then I think that's cool, right? Because getting people moving in any capacity, I think, is wonderful. But I think the more extreme, the more crazy, the more circus-like it is, and the further it is from the true evidence-based practice that we understand about how strength training, mobility, cardiovascular, stamina improvement all really work, then I think we start getting into problems here. So, and I know the fundamentals, the basics aren't super sexy, but I promise you I've built a very big following, and I'm in a cool position in the industry, largely because of doing the fundamentals very, very well.
Absolutely. You touched on it at the start. It's similar to what we say to clients, get the basics done, show up, keep going. Because when it's there, what can sometimes happen, and again, I actually touched on it today, actually. So I compete in powerlifting. And
Right.
when I talk about strength training with people think, oh, well, I don't want to compete. And I'm like, yeah, that's my area of interest. That's something that I do. I enjoy. I love competing. I love when clients compete. But equally, it's got to be what's right for the person in front of you, rather than saying, right, I'm a powerlifter, everybody powerlifts. I'm a weightlifter, everyone weightlifts. They might have a go of it, but it doesn't always have to be like that. And when it comes to, because one thing that you touched on as well in terms of setting up, a successful business with that, do you think that being able to have that consistency and be able to get buy-in from people is to just feel a little bit more comfortable and have that honesty when it comes to the content that you're putting out there, rather than trying to I suppose the point I'm getting at is put something dramatic out there so people then get in, rather than being like, look, these are the actual things that are going to allow clients to get to where they want to be.
I think there's a very strong correlation between, strong demonstration of the fundamentals and the type of people that you will attract. And those people, I think, will be the ones that self-select. It's all about the right people self-selecting to you. And I'm going to come back to your powerlifting thing with this too. If the right people self-select to your work, you're going to be able to help more of those people. If we market to rapid weight loss, rapid fat loss, then unfortunately we end up attracting a population that expects rapid fat loss. Now, those people deserve help. And in fact, I think they're some of the people that need the most immersion in evidence-based practice and lifestyle change. But as a coach, unless you have a lot of emotional bandwidth and tremendous empathy for the challenges that go along with that, if you work with 30 plus clients who are probably coming at you with the same challenges around their emotional relationship with nutrition, then that can be an extraordinarily overwhelming experience. I know that I like helping those type of clients, but I generally have to keep a very, very close limit on the sheer number of people whose particular goal is significant weight loss. And then that way I can best serve those people. I think there are coaches that self-select those people. But again, if your marketing is aggressive fat loss, you're going to attract the people who expect, unsustainable results, and they're going to be drawn to extreme measures and want to jump from diet to diet. And that demographic is going to have a high failure rate. And if we're a well-intentioned coach, we're probably not going to market that way. But if we're just looking for the dollars, which unfortunately a lot of the quote diet industry likes to do, then it will draw these people in and cycle them through. And I don't think that's particularly helpful. So it comes back to, you will attract the type of people that your messaging, your branding, everything you put out there ultimately attracts. And I like a lot of my media messaging is built around strength training, the benefits of strength training. It's not built around fat loss. So therefore, I don't tend to attract, significant fat loss clients, or the ones that do are the ones that understand that strength training is the route to it. And then we work on the lifestyle behaviors of that. And then fat loss tends to be a byproduct of the other habits going well, and nuanced conversations about nutritional choices and asking the right questions and getting them to come to realizations and make the choices for themselves. You talked about powerlifting. I think powerlifting coaches can do it a few ways. My pal, Max Hall, is a coach in the Lethbridge area here in Alberta. Max is a really sweet guy, and he's trained general population, but he really loves training powerlifters. And he's a competitive powerlifter himself. And his messaging, his media is mostly centered around powerlifting. And he's not the guy who tries to turn every client into a powerlifter. I don't like it when I see powerlifting coaches who try to make everybody a powerlifter. Powerlifting is not for everybody. But I do like the coaches who are great ambassadors to the sport that make powerlifting very accessible. I actually have a lot of respect for powerlifters whose media tends to be accessible to more of a mainstream, because it's a great outlet for people to feel strong. And it's a very inclusive environment that anyone can excel at on an individual basis, right? It's a really, really welcoming environment. Yeah, there's shitbags, ideological shitbags I hate going near this stuff, but the far right extremist type crap or the far left extremist type crap, they exist in that world. But I find for the most part, that world is a very accessible, positive thing that encourages strength. And it doesn't get rooted in like dietary ideology.
Yeah.
I've encountered coaches, I can think of one example, I won't name any names, where tries to turn everybody into a powerlifter, and in particular, older women in weight class and age classes where there's not much competition, and then turns around and brags about all the medals that he coaches, but then can't handle criticism and throws tantrums. That sort of stuff's not helping anybody either. Yeah. But I do think if we empower people with these skills and they decide, hey, they really want to do this stuff, and if our media is good to where we attract the kind of people who want to get involved in powerlifting, I think we're doing it right. And that's how I think we should approach it, from the type of training style that we love. If our media is good and attracts the people who best self-select to us, it's also going to be easier for us on average to work with that population. Going to be a little bit less emotionally draining, a little bit less stressful. We're going to be in more of a comfort zone in our wheelhouse, as long as we're also willing to learn and, grow our boundaries. I don't coach competitive powerlifters or competitive bodybuilders because I've never competed in either and I have no interest in doing so. And my bandwidth just isn't there. So I would rather have coaches that I respect and I trust who specialize in that realm and refer people who are interested in those things out to those coaches. Same goes for, really applied, postpartum pelvic floor type stuff. I've got a couple of coaches locally who are just masters at this stuff. And they're women. And I think women on average tend to be a little stronger in that realm than guys do. But guys should learn about that stuff. I think, get into the Girls Gone Strong literature, get into Brianna Battle stuff and learn. You need to have a functional, knowledge of this stuff because, a lot of the, women are more fitness consumers than men, and a lot of them have had kids. And once you've had a kid, you are postpartum forever. So you got to know some of this stuff. But if you've got some really complex stuff there, I like having some people who are just so specialized in it, I can refer out. So, yeah, I'm going all over the place with this, but I think there's a lot of wisdom here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd agree with that. I think it's because we're very, I think sometimes you can fall into two categories when I think people are starting out. You want to be a master of what is it, a jack of all trades, a master of none, and try and help everybody, or you can be try and be specific too early on, and then just like, well, I only work with these, or if everyone who works with me is going to do this. I know for me, I tried everything at the start. I think, oh yeah, I want to do this. I can train everybody, and I think I think it is good training a lot of people. But then equally, it's you learn how to adapt and adjust and how to put yourself across a little bit more. And one thing that you touched on there was obviously trying to attract people and be like, right, come and train with me. Which, for a lot of coaches, that's how they're going to earn the money. They're doing sessions in the gym. They need to attract more clients. In terms of speaking to and again on social media or whatever the following may be, how to keep that following and keep that trust and keep that buy-in from there. Because I know for me, obviously, I followed you. I know I'm a coach, but I'm sure there's clients that have followed you for a long time as well. The content that you're putting out there, and what's kind of your thoughts or best practices in terms of keeping that interaction with your current followers, because there'll be a core group of people that buy into what you do rather than always trying to attract other people.
I think you'll ultimately attract new eyes if you serve the existing people really well. If your messaging is fairly consistent, within your area of expertise, if you're really bouncing around wildly, it's going to confuse the algorithm itself. It won't even know who to show it to, but it will confuse people who are coming in, the new people who come in because of something you went off topic on, and then see everything else that they're not going to stick around. Or if you pivot really hard. I've seen fitness professionals who all of a sudden became cryptocurrency experts, or, they're involved in whatever socio-political, ideological narrative that is currently a very big thing. And that's sort of a bait and switch. And a lot of times people will sign off when it comes to very enragement-based stuff, or you'll attract people who are very plugged into enragement-based stuff. And then you have a new problem. It's just you're constantly dealing with that kind of mindset, which is very toxic. I think you just continue to be authentic to yourself. It's okay to always learn and to grow the scope of what you know. And one of the best ways to learn it is to actually turn around and apply it and teach it. But I also think that if you stay within the areas of your strengths, it sets a pretty consistent pattern for what people are going to see from you. And there's also the duality of responding, trying to respond to most comments. If you're earlier on in the process, you have to respond to every comment. I no longer am able to do that every time. I find it overwhelming. Anytime someone messages me, I always respond. Anytime someone shares something and they tag me in it, I will always say thank you. That I still believe in. I think that's essential. There comes a point where you probably can't do all the podcasts anymore. I mean, like, you're the second of 3 in a row plus an IG live. So 4 hours of just invitation, which is great. But it can get a little bit overwhelming. You also have to have boundaries around life. And I'm really immersed in building a lot of projects right now. I have a full clientele. So there's only so much I can do. But the people who've always been there to support, if you take note of the names and you'll remember, if people keep showing up, you'll remember them. Then you're always trying to be kind and conscientious to those people. Great. every once in a blue moon, I find it's rare. Every once in a while, I get a follower who is completely unaware of social cues and what's appropriate, and they just bomb you with messaging to the point that it's completely overwhelming. I've had a few of them, and then usually what happens when you set a boundary on them or try to get them to wake up and understand what's reasonable. I got one guy, it was just totally ridiculous. He would send me 9, 10 messages all in waves of blocks of messages. I'm like,
Wow.
hey, really sorry, but like, if you condense down what you're asking into a very succinct question, I can answer. But he just did not seem to understand this stuff. He's still just this vomit of like a stream of consciousness thinking. And I just wouldn't respond to everything. And at one point or other, I made the point that I just can't respond to all this stuff. And then he unfollowed me in this sort of very passive aggressive way, as if I'm going to be upset that he left. And I'm like, oh, relief. But they're rare. I probably had like 5 people who I'm just like, holy shit, this is not appropriate. And I don't lose any sleep over it. I've had to block 1 or 2 of them, but I don't lose any sleep over it because it's fairly evident that they don't understand social boundaries.
Yeah.
But I don't want anybody else to fear this stuff. If it ever pops up, don't be afraid to just to block someone or to politely say, no, I can't do this. If someone keeps messaging you, just put them on mute, whatever. Like that again, that's rare. So I wouldn't worry about it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think that's a good point to make because especially as social media following grows, there are going to be something from there. But that's why going back to the beginning that we spoke about, the more long form content that we're putting out there, can be a reference for people to go back to, or exactly like what you said at the start. You can send out links to that, which people will be useful with. Quite a lot of topics and tangents thrown in there, and lots of words of wisdom. But the last question that I like to ask for every episode is, from everything that we've chatted about there, what would be your take home points or words of wisdom?
Well, I hope everybody listening is soaking up the words of wisdom there. I still think it's keep showing up and keep doing the thing, whether it's social media, if it's writing, if it's the podcast, or whatever form of media content creation you're doing. Show up without expectation of a specific result. Always think what's in it for the other person. There's a great book that recently came out that aligns with so much of my stuff. I built a presentation. I read this book after. I'm like, shit, this guy says a lot of the same stuff. It's by a guy named Joe Polish. It's called What's in It for Them. Awesome book. And someone can read it and then be very strategic and status thinking and do all of these things tactically to get the best outcome for themselves. Like, try not to do that. You can read books like How to Win Friends and Influence People, or what the hell, like Robert Greene stuff, which I actually don't like Robert Greene stuff. It's really long-winded, very Machiavellian. What is it? The 48 Laws of Power, this kind of crap. You can read that stuff, and then, or Robert Cialdini's Influence. And you can read that book to be a bad faith actor who just manipulates people. Or you can read stuff like this and to look at it as, how can I actually, understand and protect myself from other bad faith actors? And how can I then show up in an abundant mindset, thoughtful way to help and support other people? And if you do that without specific expectation in return or any sort of timetable, and you just do it without getting discouraged, just kind of like we would want our clients to show up about workouts and show up about their nutrition, I promise great results start happening. People can tell, they can smell status-based thinking. They can tell. I get a lot of kind support, a lot. I get people who ask me to come speak at their event. I get people who ask me to come on their podcast. That's very kind and supportive of me. But then I get people who will message me and be like, hey, can I be on your podcast? And I look at that and I go, okay, this person probably is really trying to get themselves out there. I understand that, I respect that, but they think that, well, if I get on all the podcasts, that's going to make me, I'm going to be an A-lister in the industry. And it's the other way around. It's build the resources, it's build the media, it's build the reputation, it's build the relationships. And then the social media stuff can be concurrent or will follow. And then all of a sudden you'll notice you start getting the invites to come on the podcasts. And I think it's not the end of the world. I think if you've put yourself in a position where it's a reasonable request, you can ask. I don't like asking to be on anything. I don't like asking to be at events. I always wait for people to ask me. It's done well because I was always just patient with it and I just let it come because I want to support other people. But I'm rebooting an event here this fall, and we did it in 2019, and obviously the last couple of years have kind of ruined all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I've got a really cool lineup that I haven't announced yet. But when I announced that I was doing the event and the tentative dates with no speakers, no other details, just to say, hey, guys, we're this in the works, I got a number of messages from people saying, hey, no, if you need a speaker, blah, blah, blah. And none of the people who'd asked to be speakers are people that some I had no relationship with, or certainly not a strong enough one. But I have a limited number of spots, and it's going to cost me money to fly in and hotel anybody. And every single person in that lineup has got to be in a place that they built their career where the people attending look at it and go, oh my God, that's an incredible lineup. There's no way I can like not go to that. And unfortunately, I just don't have the luxury of giving spaces to buddies of mine who, no matter how well intentioned, they're thinking, well, hey, if I get in this lineup, it's going to help my career. Well, what I'm telling people is, listen, go out there, do the work, put yourself in a position where I absolutely can't not ask you to be part of this event, because you are the person who's going to put butts in seats because you built such a reputation in media across the industry. And that might take some time. And I almost feel bad saying this sort of thing. So it's got to be it's okay to, again, to ask, but you better be prepared to show up and support when I can't accommodate that request. And you better be okay with understanding why I can't make that work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think with that, it's got to be that thing of just expecting things. Whereas, like what you said about people asking you, me asking you to come on the podcast, the talks that you've been for, that's through your hard work and the fact that there's something that needs to be that we would like to listen to. So I think that was I think that's a good a good tagline for the episode. Keep showing up. Thank.
Great.
Thanks a lot, Andrew, for taking the time to jump on again. Like I say, I really enjoyed the first episode and was looking forward to speaking to you again. If anyone listening who might have any questions about what we've chatted about today, your events that might be coming up, or see the content you put out there, where can people reach out to you or find you?
Well, Stephen, thanks for having me. And I'm going to say this to your listeners as well. Stephen's been doing this for a really long time. And it does take our time, and we do it. There's no money in podcasting. We do it, and it's kind of selfish because we get these great conversations with people we want to chat with, and then we can just share it with the rest of you. But do the kindness of giving Stephen a review. Go get him a review on whether it's iTunes or Spotify or whatever. Like, simple act like that can really go a long way, especially if you've been listening for a long time. Right? Show that support. You can find me. All roads go through Instagram at Andrew Coates Fitness. And if you have any questions, message me. I respond to every message. If you have anything you're curious about there, my upcoming events, it's too tentative to actually say it yet, but a buddy of mine is looking to put an event on in Belgium, and maybe it's going to be in the April area. So keep your eyes on my media, because if that comes to be, I'll get my first trip across the pond, which will be great. And like my podcast and anything else, I will always share that stuff through my social media. So if you're curious, please ask. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. And I really appreciate what you mentioned there. And Belgium is only a ferry ride away from where I am. So it's all right.
Oh yeah. If I know, I mean, I don't have any of the names yet, but if I know my friend and what he's going to put together, that'd be a pretty star-studded lineup too. So it'll be cool.
Oh, cool. Awesome. I look forward to hearing about that. Thanks again, Andrew, for taking the time to jump on. Thanks a lot to everyone listening, and I will see you all next week.